Every story has a moment when a character crosses a line they can't step back from. Not the big battle or the final showdown, but that one scene where everything changes. A single decision, a single loss, or even just a few seconds that define who they become from that moment onward. These aren't just plot twists, they're the exact points where heroes fall, villains rise, or the innocent are destroyed. Moments like these haunt us because they expose the raw truth of fear, love, grief, and betrayal. For Anakin Skywalker, that moment came in the Dark Temple, lightsaber in hand, with terrified children looking up at him. It lasted only seconds on screen, but it told us everything. This was not just a fall, this was the death of Anakin and the birth of Darth Vader. We had seen Anakin struggle before. The fear of loss, the anger, the secret marriage, the signs of power from Palpatine, but none of these choices sealed his fate. They were warnings, but the true breaking point came when he entered the Jedi Temple after pledging himself to the Sith. The doors opened, the children ran to him, they thought he was their protector. They called him Master Skywalker, and in that chilling silence, his weapon lit up blue. The moment the blade hummed, we knew the Anakin we loved was gone. At this moment, it was the slaughter of the innocent, something no Jedi, no hero could ever justify. In storytelling, this is the point of no return. Before this, Anakin could still have been saved. He could have walked away from Palpatine. He could have faced punishment for his crimes and maybe found redemption. But after killing the younglings, he crossed into something deeper, something unforgivable. That's why this scene stayed with fans for years. It was short, almost quiet, but it spoke louder than any explosion or battle. It showed us how far fear and desperation can twist someone who once wanted to save the galaxy. Anakin's entire story was about fear. Fear of losing his mother, fear of losing Padme, fear of being powerless. Palpatine knew this and fed that fear until it became hunger. Hunger for control, for strength, for certainty. When Anakin killed the younglings, he wasn't just obeying an order, he was proving his loyalty to the dark side. He was cutting off his past, his Jedi family, his innocence. It was his way of saying, there's no going back. That's what makes it the breaking moment. He chose in cold, deliberate action. He chose to destroy the very symbol of hope he once swore to protect. Why does this scene hit so hard? Because we all expected Anakin to fall, but not like this. Fans thought this turn would be dramatic, yes, but not cruel. Not against children who trusted him. That shock is exactly why it's powerful. It tells the audience this is not the hero you grew up with. This is not a man you can root for anymore. It wasn't about lightsaber skills or force powers. It was about morality. The slaughter drew a line that even the most forgiving fan couldn't excuse. And that's why it became one of the most talked about moments in Revenge of the Sith. Before this, Anakin was a tragic figure, someone we felt sorry for. After this, he was something else. The word tragic turned into terrifying. He became a villain not just by title, but by action. That single act reframed every scene that followed. When he fights Obi-Wan, it's no longer student versus teacher, it's murderer versus defender. When Padme begs him to stop, the audience knows it's already too late. When he finally wears the mask of Darth Vader, the image carries the weight of what he has done. The younglings scene changed not just Anakin, but how we see the entire saga. It was the heartbeat of his transformation. Clips of this moment still circle online, often with captions like "the moment Anakin was truly gone," or "the scariest 12 seconds in Star Wars." A scene that lasts less than a minute continues to define one of the most iconic villains in cinema. People love origin stories, but they love breaking points even more. We're drawn to the exact moment someone is pushed too far, the moment they cross the line from victim to villain. In Anakin's case, that answer is painfully clear. The most haunting part isn't even the act itself, it's the look on Anakin's face before he ignites his saber. There's no hesitation or conflict, but emptiness. He has convinced himself that this is the way to save Padme, to save the galaxy, to save himself. And that lie makes him more dangerous than any Sith before him. While Anakin's fall was marked by violence, not every breaking point comes with blood. Sometimes it comes with a single cry of pain, and that's where Wanda Maximoff's story begins. After losing her parents, her brother Pietro, and then Vision, Wanda had already carried more grief than most heroes could survive. But the true moment of transformation didn't happen in battle. It happened in an empty house in Westview, where all that loss finally crushed her. She stood in the unfinished shell of the home Vision promised they would share. There were no walls, no warmth, just quiet. Wanda fell to her knees, the deed for the house shaking in her hands, and her grief exploded outward. In seconds, the pain she couldn't hold inside reshaped reality itself. That moment broke the world around her. This wasn't the chaos of war or the clash of enemies. This was one person's sorrow spilling into the lives of thousands. Her scream was more destructive than any weapon. It turned Westview into a false paradise, trapping an entire town inside her fantasy of family and love. What makes this scene so important is that it wasn't born from hate or greed. It was born from heartbreak. That's what makes it more dangerous. Pain like that doesn't burn out quickly, it consumes over time. Meanwhile, before Westview, Wanda was a reluctant Avenger, someone still trying to find her place. But when Hex formed, she became something else entirely. The fantasy family she created was more than comfort, it was control. She became the writer, director, and star of her own world. Anyone who stood in the way became her enemy, even if she didn't mean to see them that way. This was the moment of truth. Wanda was no longer just surviving loss, she was reshaping reality to escape it. The line between hero and villain blurred in an instant. What makes this breaking point so unforgettable is how real it feels. Wanda didn't choose Westview the way Anakin chose the Jedi Temple. It burst out of her. It was raw emotion made physical, and that makes it relatable, because grief has that same force in real life. It can change the way you see everything. In Wanda's case, grief didn't just change her perspective, it gave birth to a new identity, the Scarlet Witch. Not a teammate, not an Avenger, but a figure of legend whose power was rooted in loss. However, the most painful detail of that scene is the silence before it. No fight or warning, just a woman standing in an empty home that should have been filled with laughter. That pause made the explosion of magic hit even harder. The audience saw grief in its purest form, but it's easy to show power through battle. From that single moment in Westview, every part of Wanda's story changed. Her love for Vision became something darker, a reason to bend reality instead of face it. Also, her role as a hero twisted into something uncertain. Moreover, her journey shifted from loss to obsession, leading directly into her search for her children in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. All of this goes back to that one scream, that one release of power in an empty house in New Jersey. For Wanda Maximoff, Westview wasn't just a prison for others, it was the cage she built around herself. The moment her grief spilled over, the world learned that the most dangerous power doesn't come from rage, it comes from heartbreak. And that's the moment everything changed. But Jesse Pinkman's moment wasn't about magic or control. One night, in a small apartment while he slept beside the person he loved, everything changed. Jane Margolis was Jesse's light in the dark. She pulled him back when he was lost, stood with him when he felt worthless, and promised him a way out. For a man constantly belittled and broken, she was his hope, and the hope slipped away in one of the most haunting scenes in Breaking Bad. After Jesse passed out, Jane began choking in her sleep from a heroin overdose. Jesse never woke up. He never knew, and when he died, he blamed himself forever. That single moment destroyed the fragile part of Jesse still clinging to innocence. Unlike other characters' turning points, Jesse didn't choose this one. It happened to him, and that's what makes it so brutal. He wasn't in control, he couldn't stop it. Jane's death marked the beginning of Jesse's downfall where guilt, pain, and self-hatred consumed him. From that moment on, Jesse wasn't just a small-time cook pulled into Walt's world. He was a broken man dragging the weight of someone else's death on his shoulders. Every bad choice that followed traced back to that night. Before Jane's death, Jesse still carried a spark of youth. He cracked jokes, dreamed about a future, and tried to believe he could change. With Jane, he even imagined running away, starting fresh, and leaving the drug world behind. But when she died, that vision collapsed. Suddenly, every good thing in his life felt cursed. He started seeing himself as poison, someone who destroyed everyone he touched. This is what makes the scene so powerful. It wasn't loud, it wasn't fast, but it was permanent. It was the point where Jesse stopped being a lost kid and became a tragic figure. What's even more crushing is what Jesse never knew, that Walter White stood in the room and let it happen. Walt could have saved Jane, but he chose not to. Jesse believed her death was his fault, when in reality, it was Walt's decision that sealed her fate. This hidden truth deepened Jesse's tragedy. He carried guilt that didn't belong to him, and it pushed him further into despair. He turned to heavier drugs, dangerous choices, and reckless behavior, almost as if he believed he deserved the punishment. This moment stands out in Jesse's journey because it erased his last bit of trust in life. Jane wasn't just his girlfriend, and she was proof that he could be loved, that he could matter. Losing her stripped away that proof. From that night forward, Jesse's transformation was about survival. He wasn't trying to rise, he was trying not to drown in his own guilt. After Jane's death, Jesse was no longer the comic relief partner to Walt. He became the heart of the story, the character we wanted to see escape, the one we hoped would find redemption. His pain gave him depth, his guilt made him human. Even in later seasons, when Jesse was hardened, bitter, and violent, you could always trace it back to that one night. The night Jane died was the anchor that kept dragging him down, episode after episode. Meanwhile, Zuko's moment is quite different. Zuko wasn't always the bitter, scarred prince we first met in Avatar: The Last Airbender. He was once a boy desperate to prove himself, a son who only wanted his father's approval. That need for love set the stage for his most painful moment, the Agni Kai against Fire Lord Ozai. Zuko believed he was stepping into a duel of honor. He thought his courage in speaking up at a war meeting would earn him respect, but instead it led to his humiliation. He wasn't fighting a general, he was fighting his own father, and when Zuko refused to raise his hand against him, Ozai showed no mercy. One strike of fire across his face, and everything changed. This wasn't just a punishment, it was a message. Ozai wasn't teaching Zuko discipline, he was teaching him cruelty. He branded his own son as weak, unworthy, and disposable. From that moment, Zuko's path shifted. His scar became his identity, a constant reminder of his father's rejection. It pushed him toward obsession, the belief that capturing the Avatar was the only way to restore his honor. Without that Agni Kai, there's no Zuko we know today. Before the duel, Zuko was still hopeful. He spoke with innocence, driven by what he thought was right. After the duel, hope hardened into anger. He buried his pain under rage, chasing approval from someone who had already cast him aside. That's what makes this scene so powerful. It wasn't about physical pain, it was about betrayal. Zuko didn't just lose a fight, he lost the father he thought he had, the life he believed was his, and the face he had known in the mirror. Every time we see Zuko's scar, we are reminded of that breaking point, and so is he. It shapes his choices, his temper, his obsession with honor. It's a prison, and he carries the shame everywhere, even when no one else is looking. This makes his journey one of the most layered in storytelling, because his scar isn't just about what his father did, it's about what Zuko believes it means. To him, it was proof of his failure. To the audience, it became the symbol of his eventual growth. This moment still matters years later because it's universal, the feeling of being cast aside by the very person you looked up to. Zuko's pain speaks to anyone who's ever been told they weren't good enough by someone they loved. That's why the Agni Kai is more than just a plot device, it explains everything that follows. His anger, his confusion, his desperate hunt for the Avatar, all of it is tied to that one moment when he was left scarred and banished. After the Agni Kai, Zuko wasn't simply the Fire Nation prince. He became the outsider, the exile, the villain hunting the hero. But beneath the rage, the audience could still see the boy who wanted love. That's why his story is so compelling, because his redemption later means more when we know where he started. It all traces back to that duel, that moment when a boy's hope was replaced by a scar. For Zuko, the Agni Kai wasn't just a battle, it was the moment his innocence had burned away. The moment his obsession with honor began. The moment he stopped being a son and became an outcast. And that was the moment everything changed.